when it comes to miniature painting, everyone has that skill that is just not super easy for them, whether it's non-metallic metal or OSL, or in my case, skin. Skin's hard. At least for me it is. But that's okay, because there's a way to get better, and Malifaux has actually given me a great way to get better at painting skin. Oh, and did I mention their 4th edition is about to drop? And it's awesome? Let's talk about it. In the game of Malifaux, you play with your crew. And your crew is a group of individuals made up. Usually there's about, 7 or so different individuals with different abilities that bring something to your crew to make them worth playing. Right? Well, today I'm painting the Fleshy Residum, which is literally a bunch of skin that's been given life. It's weird, it looks weird, and painting it was super weird, but that's okay because it gave me a chance to try skin in different ways. And what I mean by that is sometimes you want green sickly flesh, sometimes you want red inflamed flesh, sometimes you want cold frozen flesh. There's a lot of different skins.
That is a lot of skin
to paint, and this gave me a chance to try a few of them out. And it was really helpful. And before I get into too much of the painting part of this video, I just want to talk a little bit about Malifaux. It is a tabletop skirmish game, and it's set in a steampunk alternate timeline of our world, I guess you could say. And it takes place in a different world. And people pass through this thing called the Breach to get to this world. And the main city is Malifaux inside this world. And it's amazing. Okay? While I was thinking about this video and putting it together, the one thing that I had to kind of talk about was the story. I am a huge lore fanatic. And when a game doesn't have great lore, it's probably like one of my biggest, oh, that's not cool things out there. This game literally has a podcast that is audio stories from the world that you can just sit down and listen to the podcast for hours. They have hundreds of episodes, and the coolest part about the episodes is they talk about the actual characters in the game. And so as they start telling a story of Hoffman or one of these other people in the world of Malifaux, you can pull up the game and look at their card. You can look at the miniature that they have, and it just makes getting into this game so much easier for me. And I love it. Okay, I cannot talk about that enough. It's called the Breachside Broadcast / podcast. And it's amazing. Okay, give it a listen if you want to see what I'm talking about. And it will pull you into this world little by little. The stories are amazing. And I wish I could just sit here and gush about them for hours. But I don't have time to do that. And you don't have time to do that. So let's move on to the painting. First thing that I did was base coat everything in black, right? I mean, these are different things of piles of flesh, but they all needed to start with that standard black base coat. And then from there, I wanted to do red. I'd heard a long time ago that if you do a red base coat for skin, it will always look like there's blood underneath the skin, which is what you want, even in your fleshy golem monster things. Okay. And so that's what I started with. And I was having some issues with my airbrush, but in the end, it worked out, turned out great. I moved from there to a skin tone. Okay. And one of the things I love about airbrushing is that if you just tweak it a little bit, add a little bit of acrylic ink, you can make it lighter. And that's what I did. And then, I wanted it almost darker for some of them. And so I added some red to it to make it darker. And then it wasn't quite the right color, so I added some yellow and started airbrushing with yellow. And in the end, I got the skin tone that I was looking for to start with. Another thing that I kind of have to bring up whenever you talk about Malifaux is that it's not your standard tabletop game where you roll dice to see what works and what doesn't work. It is, in fact, a card-based game where they sell different decks of cards, okay? And these decks are really cool, and they all have their own personality. But as you can see, if you just kind of look at the cards, you can use standard playing cards. They're numbered, right? 1 through 13 or 1 through 10 with a jack, queen, king. And they also have aces and jokers. And the only difference is that instead of having your spades and clubs and diamonds and whatnot, they have crows, masks, tombs, and rams. But as long as you're willing to do the conversion for which one is which, you can play with just a standard deck of cards. But one of the things I loved when I first started getting into this game was all of the different decks they have. They call these fate decks. It's your fate deck. And one of the coolest things about Malifaux is that you can personalize your deck. You can have your own handmade deck of cards, that you've done artwork on and stuff. But you have a hand, and when it's your turn, you use cards from your hand to do things. And the new 4th edition is actually correcting one of the big issues where the lower cards just, nobody wanted them. There was no purpose for them, realistically. And it was kind of like, I got low cards. Whereas they've changed it now. So as you get cards, the lower cards can actually give you added benefits and things later on. And so they've made it so that the entire hand is a critical thing when you're playing this game. And again, I don't want to get into the details of it too much because honestly, I don't know a ton about it yet. But the open beta is going on right now. And if you want to get in on that, you can. It's open to anyone who wants to be part of it. Download the app, go to news, and you'll find all the stuff on the open beta and how to become a part of it. Okay? But fate decks are awesome. Cheating is part of this game. Playing with your hand, like it's just one of the things that makes Malifaux really cool. And honestly, from what I understand, 3rd edition took a while. It was one of the big drawbacks of the game is that you can be playing this for 3 hours a match. And when you're thinking about I have 7 units and you have 7 units, how can it take 3 hours? Well, it did. But they've done their best with this 4th edition to streamline it, to make it easier for new people to get into, but more skill-based for people that have played it for a long time, and it moves at a much quicker pace. At least that's their goal. After I play a couple matches of the beta, I'll let you know what I think and let you know if I do think it is better or faster than what I remember playing of 3rd edition. Oh, and one thing I totally forgot to mention that has got me super hyped for this game is that they're really doing their best to make sure that terrain has an important role in the game. And what I mean by that is running, jumping off of buildings, jumping across buildings, running and fighting and doing all sorts of other things, climbing, taking fall damage, but getting closer to your opponent, stuff like that. Making a miniature game more three-dimensional is always a good thing in my opinion. So I actually ended up painting these while I was sitting outside of my daughter's ballet. But as you can see, I got that skin coat on there. I started going over the bubbles with like a neon, and then I hit it with a wash afterwards because the neon was too bright on this one. This one I went for like the pussy globules, right? And so I made a little red wash and hit it with that, and then went white over the top. I was going to paint an eye on it, and I thought that'd be kind of cool to leave this one as like a little zombie-ish. And so I was super happy with that. The hand I was super happy with. I decided to hit it with a neon green almost, and then just kind of tone that down a little bit to give it that sickly green feeling. But yeah, I was super happy with how this one turned out. Continuing on with that green, almost putrid skin, I hit this with just some neon green again, but I went a little more in depth on it, and of course colored in the eyeball on top. And so I thought that one was pretty good how it turned out too. I was super happy with it. Then there's this guy. I decided I was going to try like frostbitten flesh and make it kind of cold, and so I was toying with purples and blues and pinks and things like that, and in the end it came out kind of okay. It looks more like it's bruised than anything, but that's okay. It was my first test at frozen flesh, and I learned a lot about it, and there are parts of it that I do like and parts of it that I'm not a huge fan of, but that's okay. because that's the whole reason I did this, was to learn what I liked and didn't like, and have something I can look at later and be like, oh, that's what I need to do. Then my second to last guy here, I was able to do the bones thin enough to make it look like it was actually pushing through the other side of the skin just by with that white highlight. This miniature I actually painted by hand. Oh, no, that was the last one that I painted by hand. That's okay. Just so you know, it doesn't matter if you have an airbrush or not. You can paint them by hand. You know, yeah, it was quicker, and that's why I did it. But in the end, I just liked how this one turned out. I like the inflamed lines where, you know, the stitching is. If I had more time, I would go over that and color each of those silver, the staples, to make it look like it was an actual stapled together body. But that's for future time. And then lastly, not finished yet, but loved how this thing is turning out with the teeth and the mouths and the tongues, and talk about just a cool miniature. I was super happy with it. And the last thing that I want to talk about, the last change that has kind of got me pulled into this more, is that every crew has a master or a leader unit, right? And that leader comes with perks for their crew, depending on what their crew is. And when I think of 7 units, I think of an easy army to paint well and to put my time into. And I think of, oh, I can have a couple different crews if I want. I can change things up. It's like when you go to a Magic the Gathering, you know, Friday Night Magic or whatever, and you bring multiple decks because you want to try different things with different people. This is possible with Malifaux. The price range for the miniatures isn't bad. You can buy multiple crews. You can try different crews with different leaders. You can try a lot of different things. There's so much customizability that it just makes the game super interesting for me. And hopefully it does for you too. Oh, and did I mention that those leaders come with a crew card, which is a card that you give your opponent when you play that basically says, here's what my crap can do. So you're both on the same page. When they do something, you know what it is because you've got the card that's going to tell you what is going on. And so it's just this nice little added thing to help get you and your opponent on the same page while playing the game and just make things go a little smoother and a little faster. So anyway, if you want to learn more about that, like I said, the open beta is going on now. I'll do a full review once it comes out and what I think about it and everything. If you want to see that or you're interested at all, please like, subscribe, comment below. Let me know if that's something you're interested in. Malifaux is one of those things that I can't gauge super well how much the internet likes it or not. But for me, it's been a really cool thing to get into, and I'm super excited to paint these minis that I painted and the others that I have, because I actually have 2 crews, one from the Bayou and another that's Outcast, and so I got stuff to paint, and I'm super excited to paint. But yeah, please like, subscribe, drop a comment below. If you hit that little bell, it'll notify you when my videos come out, and you'll be able to see that video when it drops here in, I believe, a couple months is when the beta is supposed to be out. So stick around. And as always, don't spend so much time building your world that you forget to spend a little bit of time in it. Till next time.